Caitlin?
Chad, so funny to see you here.
Yeah. What are you doing here in this downtown London greeting card shop?
Well, I am looking at wedding cards, congratulations
Oh,
cards. Yeah,
that's great.
because
Is a friend getting married, or is there a...
a dear friend of ours is getting married.
I like this one with the fox and the his eyeballs are bulging out with hearts, and
Yeah,
it
yeah, yeah,
just says
yeah.
Ayuga, Ayuga.
Yeah,
I
I
like
think
that
that's
one.
perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. You get that one. Yeah, and I'll still look, but should we tell everyone how we got here? Why are we
Yeah,
celebrating this wedding?
I we took the ferry from France
Yeah.
over, and then you said I need some time alone, and I
I
said
see,
that's
yes. Give me
understandable
space.
because I wouldn't. I kept sitting next to you on the ferry and just talking
It
constantly.
was disrespectful. Okay, I think we have to go back. We have to go back to Murder on the Links,
Okay.
chapter 22, and we have to check in on Hastings. This is a big one.
Will the shop owner let us stand here and talk about it?
Yeah, because we're about to spend so much money on all these wedding cards. They better let us.
Yes, perfect. Let's just stand here and talk about chapter 22. I know that you love this title of this chapter, so you go ahead and say it.
I love this title. Everybody will love it because it's named I Find Love.
Oh,
Finally. Finally.
finally. So, just a quick little synopsis. Hastings is reacting to Perot's
Mm-hmm.
bombshell about the photo that he, or
Mm-hmm.
it's like, what was it? That there was a
Okay, so
photograph.
he
Yes.
found a photograph in Jack's bedroom, and it's the face of Cinderella, but it says Love Bella. So he's a little confused at this point because I don't think he doesn't know about the twin. He knows Cinderella has a sister, but he doesn't know that they look pretty much the same. So I feel like he's starting the chapter excited about the chance of seeing her, but also very puzzled and a little almost downtrodden because he's like, ugh, Jack may be in love with my girl a little bit.
Exactly. So there's a little bit of jealousy. And thank you for reminding me that sea air on the ferry really messes with my mind. So I really appreciate that. So at that point in time, they are still at the Villa Genevieve, and then they bolt to the ferry. And
Mm-hmm.
they decide to go to London to try and find Cinderella and, as it turns out, her twinish sister.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be in London for a little while now, I think, for a couple of chapters here.
We should get comfortable. Mm-hmm. But we will go back to France.
But so what happens when they're on the ferry then?
So, yeah, so like Hastings is just kind of in a state of a lot of questions. He's like, Poirot, why were you looking around for Cinderella? What do you know? What do you expect? I just am full of questions. And Poirot is like, we need to find Bella right away. And he says Jack's arrest won't be in the papers yet. So she won't be able, and I guess we have to imagine that Jack's so famous that, or he's just from such a renowned family that it would be a big deal if he were
Yes.
arrested. Poirot's like, we have to get to her first because it may spook her. We also won't get her kind of honest answer, just like he was asking Marthe. He's like, Jack has really got to be out of the way for all this so the women can tell the truth. And so Hastings is like, well, how do we just find a random woman in London? And he's kind of acknowledging the fact that it's actually really big and it's not very likely that people would run into each other. But
Right.
Poirot's like, don't worry. I did a favor for this man named Joseph Aarons, who is a theatrical agent. And he will definitely know because he knows the faces and names of all the acts in town. So very convenient.
Of course, Poirot has all of these people who owe him
Yeah.
favors because he does this very unique and specialized work. And so while you're like,
Mm-hmm.
Joseph Aarons is being introduced in chapter 22, it's
Yeah,
also like, oh, that makes sense.
of
Sure.
course.
Poirot
Yeah.
has a long, vast history that we don't even know about.
We just have to believe it. Or else this whole book would fall apart right here. So they find Joseph, he looks at it, and immediately he's like, it's the Dulce Bella kids. They're sisters, they're acrobats, they're singers. I'll find where they're going to perform. And so Hastings and Poirot go to like a variety show, which I think is like a really unique scene for both Poirot and Hastings, because all of their friendship so far has really active around crime scenes or in trains and on ferries. And so the thought of them sitting in a theater together is actually, I feel uncomfortable by it. I don't know why. I'm just like,
that's so
who are you in a theater?
I felt it was more like Poirot's day out.
It's funny that you say that, because Hastings, once Bella enters Bella and Cinderella, so many double L's, enter the stage, then he's really excited. But beforehand, he's really, again, he's moody, pouty Hastings, which we love, because he's like, Poirot won't tell me what's going on. I think that maybe this girl I have a crush on, out of the thousands of girls I have a crush on, maybe with someone else. Mm-hmm. And I just wrote in the margins, Hastings as a theater reviewer, because he like goes over the shows and acts before then. And he says, the show was wearisome beyond words, or perhaps it was only my mood that made it seem so. So he's just grumpy. And then he goes on to like describe all these shows in like the most negative terms possible. He is just so cranky.
Yeah, I did feel like he was very uneasy, and since it's his voice we're hearing it in, there was some, but I did feel that given all of the chaos around him, that Poirot is very centered. At the show. Yeah.
Which is actually kind of what happens next. So the Dulce Bellas, or the Dolce Bella sisters, they get on stage, and Hastings is like, oh my God, they are so great. He even describes himself in the state he's in. He says, my heart beats sickeningly. It's kind of funny. I mean, we've talked about this for so much, but like the woman he actually falls in love with makes him nervous, uncomfortable. He gets agitated by her. A lot.
Yeah.
So it's a very different scenario than his other encounters with women, I feel like, where he's confident.
She is a complete challenge to Hastings' idea of what a woman should be. And so it's interesting that he feels like his heart beats sickeningly is really like a interesting choice of words. Yeah.
Yeah. Like she's going to open up his world a little bit. And that's terrifying.
It does get to Hastings so much that he has to leave the theater.
Yeah, he says, suddenly I felt I could remain no longer. I must get out into the air. Poirot was always hanging back, and he's like, sure, you go. You go out. I'll just stay here. So Poirot's like, I'll finish the show. Hastings is so upset. He returns to the hotel room. He makes himself a whiskey soda. And then he thinks for a very long time, staring into an empty grate. Which is, I think, I can't tell if Beach Hastings or Empty Grate Hastings is like the saddest Hastings, but they're both pretty low points for him where he needs to think in a very specific location. And things are about to get very dramatique. Suddenly, the door bursts open to his hotel room, and who should enter? Cinderella herself. And he says that like, it seems like she just run. She was out of breath. And she quickly explains that she had followed him when she saw him leave. So I think she must have just like leapt off the stage. And she's still in her stage makeup, which I think is like very dramatic. For Hastings, it's just like, she's like amplified in terms of being womanly. And he notices that she's terrified, and he loves that because he knows how to deal with terrified women, or he thinks he does.
Right.
He's like, perfect. I am here to save the day. And she really wants to know desperately, and this is why she's so terrified, is she wants to know why Poirot is there and if he's a detective. So what's really freaked her out is calm, quiet Poirot in the audience. And you and I know, and I think everybody knows here, that Cinderella is so smart. She is an actress. She clearly has read Hastings from the start. I think her desperation is genuine, but she knows what to do to get him to talk, which is to be a woman in distress. She's crying and she bursts into tears. I think she's on the floor at this point. She kind of just like sinks to the floor. And he's like, I knelt down by her, holding her in my arms. Don't cry, child. Don't cry. You're safe here. I'll take care of you. I know everything.
Wow.
Which we know he doesn't know anything. So he's in the zone. He can think of her as a child, which is uncomfortable, but great for him. And he's ready to play the knight in shining armor, the prince. He's like, my role is here.
Right. And it's very interesting what he does in that role that he's decided upon for himself.
Yeah. So we're about to get to like a really sticky point in the friendship of Hastings and Poirot. He kind of gets her in this state to admit that she took the dagger and why she asked to look around. And Hastings is so relieved that she had this other motive to be there. And it wasn't that morbid curiosity with crime that he was so disgusted by. And then right at that moment, she's like, will you tell the police about me? And he's like, no, I could never. Also at the same time, the way Agatha Christie describes it is her voice gets meeker and quieter and smaller as she asks him for more things. So you know that she's like, can I get away with this if I'm even more helpless? And she's like, why would you not give me up? And Hastings is like, because I love you.
Wow.
She replies, you can't, not if you knew. Which kind of a bummer for him, but she's like alluding to that there's this bigger truth here that he doesn't understand.
Right. She's making Hastings feel like there's something that he doesn't know that has to do specifically just something in her past. And she's really talking about like things are about to get really complicated and it's not worth it.
And she's so sneaky here because she's like, you can't love me, not if you knew. And then she's like, so what do you know? Mm-hmm. She's so smart here. And Hastings gives her and gives us his theory as to what happened. So he doesn't realize that Cinderella and Bella look so similar. So he tells her that he thinks she, Cinderella, visited Monsieur Renaud, ripped up the check. He thinks that she lingered on the property, saw a man on the golf links. She thought he was Jack. And she stabbed him out of jealousy. He's kind of painting this scene where she's there and she's the murderer. And he thinks she's the murderer. And he's saying, I'm not going to tell the police because I love you. And she is so smart. She's like, yes, that's exactly how it happened. It did not happen that way. And she's like, I can see it all as you tell it. She's like, yep, okay, I'll let you believe that because she's protecting her sister. Oh, she's so good. We kind of wrap up this love scene, I guess. She's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. And then she kind of pauses and she's like, I honestly think in her head, she's like, it doesn't benefit me to have him think that I'm in love with Jack. Because I can't get him to do as much if he's jealous and if he's also thinks that I'm no longer attainable. And so she's like, wait, you think that I love Jack? And he's like, yeah. She's like, no, not as I love you. Never as I love you.
And she kisses him.
Uh-huh. And she's like reeling him in, which is the first time Hastings does get an in the book smooch, which is great because he's been waiting so long.
Oh, no, it's monumental. Mm-hmm. And looking back at it in the second read, it becomes obvious why he does what he does. A woman has kissed him. Yeah. And that's it. You could be like, go pick up that van over there, Hastings, and he'd lift it over his head and be like, yes, did it. So, yeah, his allegiance now, that kiss seals his allegiance to Cinderella. No one can get in his way of protecting her, including Poirot. And so who enters this hotel room? Because it's his hotel room. I think they're sharing, I imagine they have one of those little connecting doors. They have a little suite that connects them. Very cute. So Poirot comes in. He's like, oh, I'm, back from the show. And Hastings helps Cinderella escape. Poirot hasn't done anything. No, yeah, he's just like, do-do-do. And Hastings kind of attacks him. He pushes his shoulders back with his hands so that Cinderella can run by. How could you treat your friend this way, who let you into all these crime scenes where you didn't belong? Right. And I love what you say there, too, because it's not as if Poirot comes in and like points a finger at Cinderella and goes, you. He's just being like, oh, hey. And then he's just rammed up against a wall and held there while Cinderella runs past. Poirot must be like, what?
Yeah, or he's like, oh, of course you did.
Right. He's like, okay, now I know that you're going to lie about it because you just did this to me. So like in the future, you're going to, exactly, commit perjury.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And exactly, this is what he says after he's pushed against a wall by his supposed friend. He says, Mon ami, you do this sort of thing very well. The strong man holds me in his grasp and I am helpless as a child. But all this is uncomfortable and slightly ridiculous. Let us sit down and be calm.
Yeah.
Because he's like, Hastings, no.
Right. Just like, yep, you know what? You're stronger than I am, Hastings. Great.
Got it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Way to go, buddy.
Yeah. And then Hastings is like, wait, you won't go after her? You won't pursue her? And he says, do I look like Giraud?
So I've got Poirot, I said, I'm sorry, I admit I've behaved badly to you over this. Mm-hmm. But sometimes one has no choice. And in future, I must take my own line. Poirot nodded his head several times. I understand, he said. I feel like Hastings is doing that thing where I have to tell you that this is the way it's going to go now. And Poirot's like, yeah.
Cool.
Got it.
Yeah. And so then Poirot, though, asks him a question. And he did say that he's warned Hastings about her. Mm-hmm. He says, I warned you, and I realized that this girl must have taken the dagger. I warned you. Perhaps you remember, but already it was too late. But tell me, how much do you know? And so Poirot's trying to figure out what story Cinderella has concocted, kind of has led Hastings to, I guess. Like, where is Hastings? And he's kind of like, I know everything. Nothing you tell me could surprise me. But then he swears, he's like, she wasn't the one who committed the crime. When I traveled from France, from that first opening scene with her that day, we went all the way to Victoria Station, which we know they didn't because they parted in Calais.
Yeah.
She never got on that boat. She never left France. This exchange to me is like the saddest one because Poirot knows Hastings is lying. And he's like, would you swear that in a court of law? And Hastings is like, most certainly. And then Poirot says, Mon ami, long live love. It can perform miracles. It is decidedly ingenious what you have thought here.
It's like he is saying that I am a witness now for Cinderella, and I am lying about that, and that is it. So you're not going to ever be able to convict her of murdering Mr. Renaud.
This, to me, is capital B betrayal. This feels so like Hastings, to me, has crossed a line in his friendship. And again, we know that Poirot is tougher than that, but I think it just is such a detriment to like who Hastings is and his own sense of morality.
I don't see how you could have Hastings be in the next book after this, because it's not necessarily the betrayal. It's that he's completely played out. His character can't get more extreme than this.
That's so true. Yeah. But let's go to chapter 23, Difficulties Ahead, which I would say is a great way to explain the rest of the book.
I feel like in Difficulties Ahead, this is the most intense realizations that Hastings is having about the decisions he's made to protect Cinderella at all costs, because he realizes that it's much more complicated than he had initially thought. And he's starting to put together like what that could potentially mean, not only for his relationship with Poirot and also potentially committing perjury, but also if Jack is innocent and Cinderella did kill his father, Mr. Renaud, then Jack ends up going to jail as an innocent man. And this is all like, I love that it's coming to him a chapter later, like, oh, wait, shit, Jesus. Okay, wait a second. And that is also great because, and I love this about this scene that Agatha Christie has absolutely nailed, is that he's with Poirot. They're together hanging out. And so it's Poirot is not acting like you. It's like, I don't want to be with you. He's like, Okay. And that's got to make Hastings feel so uncomfortable.
I feel like this chapter could be called, "Oh no."
Right.
And so that's kind of like the expression on Hastings's face as he and Poirot were like just going about London.
Yeah.
But they go to breakfast, and I love this. They have breakfast, and it's like nothing happened. Poirot doesn't chide him or anything, and that only, as you said, makes Hastings more uncomfortable. But Hastings does, he's like, I want to go find Cinderella. So he's like, Poirot, I'm going to go for a walk. And Poirot's like, Hastings, don't. The sisters have already run away. Just stop.
Right.
And so Hastings at first feels relieved. He's like, yay, Cinderella got away. And then I love this so much. He's like, but wait, I don't know how to get in touch with her. Still, he doesn't know her real name, even though he's professed his love to her and that said he would commit perjury for her. She, in theory, could run away and he could never see her again. And Poirot is really calm. And this is where we get the great line. I had learned with Poirot that the less dangerous he looked, the more dangerous he was. So Poirot is getting to be almost like a little scary, I think, to Hastings here. And then, we get such a good standoff here between Hastings and Poirot. So Poirot's like, hey, buddy, it's time. We got to go back to France. And Hastings is like, well, aren't you going to look for Bella? And Poirot's like, nah, she'll come for me when I need her. And he's like, well, why then do you want to go to France with me? Because I am such a threat to you. Like, I could be, kind of causing like kind of subterfuge. Is that can you say
yes.
ing? Yeah. Like I could be kind of putting a wrench in all of your plans. And Poirot's like, you would just follow me in like a really dumb disguise and I would be really annoyed because everyone would think you looked stupid. And so he's like, why don't we just go together as friends? And Hastings is like, well, okay, I gotta warn you though, I'm still protecting Bella. And Poirot goes, I know all. You are my enemy. Be my enemy then. It does not worry me at all.
And I love that he's also like, it would be an embarrassment, not just to you, but to us both.
And the passengers.
It's so good.
Everyone would be embarrassed. It's kind of like how we travel.
Yeah, exactly.
Then they're like, okay, we'll go back to France. Clearly, I'm not formidable, Poirot. This is where Hastings, as you just said, realizes to save Bella, he would risk Jack. And so he's like, I think maybe I do need Poirot to fix this. And that's kind of where he ends, is he's like, I have done a bad thing and I hope that Poirot will come in and solve all my problems.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he's writing this so we can read it.
Yeah.
So I kind of realized at this point that I'd kind of overstepped my boundaries and really didn't know what I was doing, so I really needed Papa Poirot to come in and save the day.
And then we end, this is another really good cliffhanger. He says, at the bottom of my heart, there still remained a cold fear. This to me feels like we're getting a proper climactic, what's going to happen bit of this book.
Hastings is feeling the uneasiness that we are feeling.
Yeah.
Did you want to buy those wedding cards? And then we gotta get on the ferry. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because we have to go.
Where should we meet up in France? Because I just want to go down to the beach for a second before we continue.
You can't quite go to the beach yet. We're actually going to Saint Omer because we need to go to the prison. We need to save Jack. Here we are. We're at chapter 24 and appropriately titled, it's Save Him. And we even get an exclamation point. So like we know Jack's life is at stake. And just as Hastings had hoped that Poirot's going to fix it, we're going to see if Poirot actually can.
Jack is acting really strange when he is being questioned by the authorities, and he's not giving the answers that an innocent man would give. And so the question becomes, who is Jack covering for?
We have to figure this out to save him. Yeah, so we get Poirot and Hastings crossing the channel on an evening boat, then arriving in Saint Omer, and they're at the prison. They visit Otay first, and again, they kind of just like disparage Giraud. They're like, doesn't he suck? He doesn't know anything. And this is interesting too, because remember that Ote has that really interesting judge role where he's in the investigation, but is also in charge of prosecuting. He's been the one talking to Jack, kind of figuring out like, okay, do we have a case here? So Poirot's like, do you have any other evidence besides the fact that Giraud arrested Jack? Ote's like, not really. In fact, Jack isn't saying anything. He hasn't been specific. He hasn't defended himself. And so Ote's like, well, why don't you talk to Jack? And this is when we learn that Madame Renaud is still unconscious. She's in her week-long coma.
Because she hit her head.
Yeah. And it's interesting here because she's the only one who can reveal to us in truth that plot to fake Monsieur Renaud's death. She's the only other person who knows about it for certain. And Ote's also like, I received a really interesting letter. Hastings is like, I noticed right away it was written in a woman's handwriting, but Poirot doesn't read it. And that irks Hastings. And then they run into Giraud, and I love this. Again, there's like one of the last real snarky exchanges. And Giraud's like, the case is almost over. And isn't that nice? And Poirot's like, yeah, it is great that the case is almost over. And Giraud's like, I'm glad that you finally agree with me that Jack is guilty. And Poirot's like, I absolutely do not think Jack is guilty.
Yeah. There's a wager made.
Yes. Okay.
As things get super intense between the two of them.
Poirot's the one that makes the bet. And that's why it's so surprising to Hastings. He's like, what? Poirot betting? This is so un-Poirot-y. I think Poirot is kind of sick of everything at this point, and he's like, I'm done with Giraud, I'm done with Hastings. I'm going to prove my point in this really dramatic way. But also, I think it's important to note Poirot wagering $5,000 is so different than the humble Poirot who's in like the guest house with 9 other roommates. That we meet.
Yes. Yeah, it's actually it's a little over $7,600.
Oh my God. Okay. Poirot. So he's like, he's not only saying like, look at how good of a detective I am, but he's also like, look at how much money I have.
Right, exactly. He's like, so totally, it's a shocking bet. Like, I think like if you're reading the book, you're like, whoa, what? And it's like in that period of time, and but Poirot's like, I'm so confident and I'm so well off that I can do this. Yeah, it's beautiful.
There are many Poirot power moves in this book. So we get the bet. But then to kind of diffuse the tension, Monsieur Stoner, the
secretary, Mr. Renaud's secretary,
he arrives and he's like, I'm here to support Jack, which is great. I don't think he's a murderer. I never did. And Poirot says things look very black against him still. And I think we'll find it really hard to prove his innocence. So that tells us, too, that we have 4 more chapters.
Yep.
And Stoner, again, is just like, why is Jack acting so weird? Poirot asks to be alerted to when Madame Renaud wakes up. That's a really important thing here, is he's like, please let me know. And then he also shares that he found out there was not 1 commemorative knife made, not 2, but 3 commemorative knives that we're working with. And he says that 1 was for Madame Renaud, 1 was for Jack. And this is, again, to commemorate Jack's service in World War I. And the 3rd one was given to Bella because she's his love interest. And Poirot's like, okay, everyone, now I'm ready to read this mysterious letter that I got that I was being really withholding about. And it's from Marthe. And she says, Poirot, I need your help. So now we go back. We're on another train. We're back in Merlinville. Marthe is really, really anxious. She asks if Jack is denying the crime. She says that she doesn't believe it. And Poirot's like, and this is oh so smart. He's like, Marthe, I think he's covering for someone. And that is so sneaky because it only gives her more reason to be really anxious.
Right.
She's deflecting here. She's like, it could be Stoner. It could be Madame Renaud. It could be anyone. And then Poirot's like, hey, Marthe, do you know your mother's real name?
This is a pretty vicious tactic because nothing like this has been discussed.
Yeah, he's like, let me tell you all of this history. So she begins crying, which kind of indicates to him and everybody else that she knows. She's like, yes, now everybody knows who my mom is. But then he's like, but did you know the real identity of Monsieur Renaud? And she says no. And then Poirot tells everyone in that room the truth. And her response is so interesting. She calls him the greatest detective in the world, and then she begs Poirot to save Jack's life. And I think this is so interesting, thinking about what her motive is. She's definitely not as cunning as Cinderella. So I do wonder if she's acting distressed because she feels bad about Jack and she did have some feelings for him, or if she's just kind of playing into this story that she's already set up. So she's like, well, naturally, this is what someone who would be the character in the made up story that I'm projecting to everyone, this is what she would do.
Things are shifting, and I don't think she really cares very much about Jack.
Yeah.
I think she is moving towards like, okay, now there's going to have to be another pivot.
She also still wants to marry Jack for his money.
Oh, yeah.
So she's the game is still going on. She hasn't given up on this con, basically.
I think what that shows is the difference between Bella's feelings for Jack and Marta's feelings for Jack. Bella's are very much like, even though her story is very complex, her motivation is simple.
Is pure.
She loves Jack, and Marta it's much more complicated.
Yeah. And what we get here in this next chapter is she will do anything to save Jack. She would risk her life. Whereas Martha's like, let me cry a ton and blame other people.
Right.
But she doesn't sacrifice anything. So let's get to it. So chapter 25, An Unexpected Denouement. So this is kind of fun because I feel like Agatha Christie's like, you know it's coming, you know the Poirot denouement is coming, but let me play around with it. And so this is unexpected. So what we get is a little bit of a reveal, but still a lot needs to happen to get there.
It all happens kind of at Jack's, I guess we would call it a trial, maybe.
Yeah,
or
it's kind of like a pre-trial. Like they're trying to prove that he should go on trial. At this point, there's like you kind of have to like make the case.
It's almost like a grand jury situation.
Yeah.
In a weird way, where people are deciding whether or not to go forward with it.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, like Jack is clearly not thinking of himself first and foremost. The questions are answered in the opposite way, but it is a similar sort of thing as to what happens in Styles with what's his name?
I think it's John, isn't it?
No, it's I was thinking at
the other guy.
Yeah, the guy who actually did it. The first time that he's put in this situation in the town, he answers everything the opposite of what you would because he wants to go to trial. And so now we have this thing here with Jack where he's answering it because he wants to shield Bella.
And again, would you say this is a little mirror reflection of Styles?
Most definitely.
Yeah. This is a great scene though. And it is unexpected because suddenly we're in like this dramatic court scene. We were just in the theater in London.
Yeah.
We were just at
we're just
variety
watching a show.
show.
Yeah. We're just loving it.
And so suddenly it's dramatic court time. So Jack is, as you said, he's like sullen. He doesn't show emotion. They ask him, were you in Marylandville that night? And he says, no, we know he was there. Then they bring in the porter, and the porter's like, yeah, he was there.
Right.
And then they bring in a second porter. So Hastings is like, okay, I see Jack being very heroic here. Jack is shielding Bella, who he still thinks is Cinderella at this point.
He thinks that Jack is shielding Cinderella, but Jack is actually shielding Bella, Cinderella's twin sister. Yeah. You know how that goes. I mean, we've been through it 3 or 4 times each.
I know,
it's
so
just
awkward when that happens.
It is. Basically, the magistrate, the person who has like heard this back and forth, and Jack saying all of these things and not defending himself and not saying anything other than things that would lead him to be incriminated. And the magistrate is like, listen, man,
Yeah.
you're going on trial. Like, that's what's happening because the way you're acting, I have no other choice.
Yeah, so the magistrate's like, as you said, he's like, come on, man, you're giving us nothing here. We want to give you a fair trial, but you're not being very helpful. And Jack is like, well, okay, I didn't kill my father. And then Hote is so frustrated and is kind of like admonishing Jack. And then he's interrupted. We can imagine like the door being flung open and banging on the wall. A lady enters. And of course, I guess she's an actress too. She's like, hello, my name is Bella Duveen, and I wish to give myself up for the murder of Monsieur Renaud. Ah! And that's the way it ends. And so that's a surprise to us. But also finally, Hastings is like, they look alike, and it's not Cinderella, it's her sister.
Right.
So many realizations here. So this is why we have an unexpected denouement. We get this reveal. We know it's false because, again, let's remember why both Jack and Bella are covering for each other is because they both stumble upon Monsieur Renaud's body at the same time. They look at each other and are like, oh, you killed Monsieur Renaud. And then they're covering for each other, and it's all a big misunderstanding.
Magical shrubbery. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Magic happens in that shrubbery. Now it's back to Hastings. We have the chapter called I Fall in Love, and this chapter is called I Receive a Letter. So we know it's Cinderella connected in some way. Okay, so Hastings receives this letter. Cinderella is apologizing, and she tells all. We get her perspective. She says, the day that you and I met in that fated train conversation, I was nervous about Bella, who I knew was in love with Jack, and she was worried. Bella was worried that Jack had fallen in love with someone else, and we know that that's Marthe. And Bella had gone to Merlinville instead of meeting Cinderella at like an agreed upon place. I guess they were traveling around France or probably performing in France. Mm-hmm. And then, so she knows Bella is like in Merlinville. She knows she's going there to figure out what's going on with Jack and kind of say like, hey, are you still in love with me? Are we still cool? And she confesses to like going to investigate and meeting Hastings and seeing an opportunity to save her sister. She realizes that Bella probably made a mistake, that she thought she was killing Jack, but she was really killing his father. And so she wanted to protect her sister, probably with like, you know how they were talking about fingerprints and like everybody knows about fingerprints. So she's like, I'm going to steal the dagger. So she lied to Hastings when she said she was going to the hotel. That's why she was missing, and that's why Poirot couldn't find her. She goes on another boat. She goes on the ferry from Calais to Dover again. And in the middle of the trip, she drops the dagger into the sea. Then she and Bella meet up again in England. And Cinderella updates her. So Bella, I guess, isn't really concerned. She's like, thanks for sticking up for me, but I didn't murder anyone. Then Cinderella sees Hastings and Poirot in the theater. So that's kind of the next step in her story. And she's like, oh no, they followed us. And then she realizes that Hastings suspects Cinderella and not Bella. And so she's like, good. I will take the fall for everybody is taking the fall for everybody else. Yep. Cinderella is like, I did it, so Bella didn't do it. Bella's like, I didn't do it, so Jack didn't do it. They're very chivalrous. They're very like, I will lay down my life for yours. They're all kind of like menches, I guess. That kind of harkens back to the conversation that Poirot had with someone very early in the book about what you would commit crimes for. And he's like, you would commit crimes for people you love. And so we have all of these people committing perjury for the people that they love.
Yeah.
This story literally is Heart Eyes. I think in the end, it's a romance. It's like an optimistic romance. Who knew we would find ourselves here? We literally are in a heart-filled greeting card. That's where we are in the end.
And it is the exact opposite of the Baraldi case.
Mm-hmm. That's so true.
These people who are like all variously very much emotionally sound and in love and willing to sacrifice for each other, whereas the Baraldi case is just people planning to like just screw each other over as much as possible.
And so she's asking him for forgiveness because she knew that he was willing to defend and protect her. And so I guess that's too where maybe she's like, oh, this guy actually would lay down his life for me. That's pretty rare. And so she signs it. We finally get her name, and we're going to keep calling her Cinderella. She signs her name, Dulcie Duveen. And with that, we find out the name of the woman who Hastings will end up with.
This is all being told as, it happened in Hastings' past. And he then says that he admits that he still keeps the letter.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, ooh, what could that mean? Oh, that seems like maybe things worked out.
Okay, so Hastings gives the letter to Poirot, and he lets him read it. And Hastings is like, hey, Poirot, did you know that it was the other sister the whole time? And Poirot's like, yes, I did. And I was hurt by your actions. But I did want to test your feelings to see if you were truly in love. And so there's a little bit, again, of Poirot matchmaker, where he's allowing Hastings to act out, kind of like a toddler. But it's to test whether his feelings are really true, because Poirot ultimately wants the best for Hastings.
Hastings makes a point of saying, there's something wrong with the letter, though, Poirot. She doesn't say that she cares for me. And Poirot's like, dude, read between the lines. Everything in Cinderella's letter to you says that she loves you. And then Hastings loses his mind and is like, I need to find her because now it's been confirmed by Poirot. Yeah,
Poirot says that a girl likes you. That's fact.
That's fact.
And Poirot's like, don't worry, leave it to Papa Poirot. So Papa Poirot is back. So we have 2 chapters where at the end, Hastings is like, I really hope Poirot fixes things for me. And this is one of them.
I love what it says about Poirot, where he is now figuring out how to get justice served in the case, but he's also thinking about how to make sure that Hastings' romantic life, his fantasy life with Cinderella, becomes true.
Yeah.
And it's great that he's working on both cases at the same time.
He's really good at multitasking. I think Poirot does love Hastings. I don't think he would waste his time with Hastings because he gets so upset at other people when they're being dumb. And he really gives Hastings, he allows him to think and guess, but he also is, as you said, like he's looking out for him. So I think Poirot definitely feels affectionately towards Hastings.
Yeah, and I feel that's the reason that the kind of nickname Papa Poirot works so well, because they're friends, but it's not like regular friends that are on the same level.
Yeah, he's like, let me take care of you. Poor Poirot. He needs to go to the beach after this. Yeah, chapter 27.
Oh, also just quickly, I wanted to quickly ask Caitlin, where are we now?
We're in Marylandville again.
Is this a situation where you have invited me to the patio seating at the outdoor restaurant of your hotel, and I have put on my best sandy jacket and summer pants, and we're sitting out enjoying some beverages as we recant the last 2 chapters of The Murder on the Links?
It is celebratory. I feel like there's a lot of beach umbrellas, a lovely breeze, and then there's like one of those trays of treats that has like tiers, like 3 levels of like delicious treats. That's what we get because we're here. We're on chapter 27.
So great. And I really, really appreciate you putting it on your room bill. That's really kind of you. So thank you.
This is the last time, Chad.
I'm sorry. I won't mention money. Fine, Caitlin. Okay.
Okay, so here we are. Chapter 27 is Jack Renault's story. It starts with Jack being released from prison because Bella has just taken his place. So he's not joyful necessarily. He's still really pained and kind of sullen, and he looks really rough. And he's like, I was trying to protect Bella the whole time, but it was just kind of pointless. Yeah, do you want to, sorry, I forgot about the summary. Do we need a summary?
I don't think we need to summarize with this. I think we're just going forward. Yeah, but thank you for asking. I appreciate it. Did you want, can I have this chocolate one?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
But only one. So Poirot comforts Jack. And this is an interesting moment because I feel like Poirot knows that she's not going to be in there forever because he's going to solve it. But he's like, don't worry about Bella. The courts are very lenient with youth and beauty. So Jack basically, I think kind of like in his guilt, he starts kind of confessing. He says, like, I treated Bella so poorly. Poirot's like, okay, tell me everything, and then I'll tell you everything that happened with your parents because I know. He's like, well, I came back to Marylandville, kind of like check in with Marthe and be like, again, do you love me before I go to South America?
Right.
And he heard a cry through the shrubbery. So he hears a cry. He stumbles upon the grave with his father in it and a knife in his back. And then he says, I saw her looking like a ghost. And then the girl turned and ran. He's talking about Bella. And then Jack is interrupted. We can't finish the story. And Poirot can't tell Jack about his mother because Madame Renaud has regained consciousness and she is ready.
Unbelievable timing.
So Poirot's like, let's all go to Villa Marguerite. And also Jack is really excited because he gets to tell the good news that he's released. So Jack is like, Poirot, you tell my mom I'm okay and I'll go tell Marthe. At this point, I think his heart is in two places. He still is excited about Marthe, but he's also feeling beholden to Bella. Basically, like Jack tells Marthe, then they go back to Madame Renaud's house, Jack's house, and Poirot is like, maybe don't go in and maybe don't take Marthe in. But then Madame Renaud appears at the top of the stairs, and we got to be careful because she's appeared at the top of the stairs.
This is tough for her. She's wobbly.
Yeah, she is a bit wobbly.
The important thing to remember here is that Poirot has had time with Madame Renaud alone.
Yes. And Poirot was right that Jack probably should have stayed away because her choice, the thing she decides to do at the top of the stairs, is to renounce Jack. She's like, you are morally guilty of your father's death. You will never get any money. She warns him. She's like, you will have to see what happens with the daughter of your father's enemy.
Jack is stunned at this. Yeah, he was so excited to go tell his mom, guess what? I'm out of jail, Mom, and everything. And she's like, you.
And this is a bit of a setup, right? Because I think right.
And we need Marthe to be convinced that Madame Renaud is writing Jack out of the will.
Yeah, like that's why she would bring up money after her son is released from prison. So right. Marthe, she's like, Jack is not doing so well because he was in jail. He is in shock and he has of course, he's developing a fever. So she's like, I will take him back to my house and nurse him back to health. And so then Hastings and Poirot are like, this is a great time to go get dinner.
Well, they're peckish. I mean, It's been a long day. They were at a prison. Now they're back at a fancy house.
Yeah, they're like, we need snacks. So they find a hotel and Poirot is like, has an English lady named Miss Robinson arrives. And Hastings is like, who? So then who appears? It is Dulcie / Cinderella herself. Poirot has given her a different name. Since her sister's name is in the news, people won't recognize her, so he's covering for her. And then she gives Poirot the dagger. She's like, I actually kept it the whole time. Why?
Right. You could have cut down on just a little bit of travel there.
And so she's like, I think whatever you guys are doing next after this delightful dinner, I need to go with you. And Poirot warns, he says, it will not be amusing. In all probability, nothing will happen. And in this case, who knows if he believes it, but he is very wrong. And actually, both Hastings and Poirot, they need Cinderella. We had the courtroom drama. We had even like the little kind of more slapstick drama of Poirot going through Jack's things and not wanting to get caught. And now we are in a nighttime action sequence, I'd say, right?
Yeah, I'd say definitely a thriller experience. Yeah, very much. Yes.
Which we didn't see coming because we were, especially, and then we were also like in Hastings rom-com zone. So we've been a lot of places, but just get ready.
Things are ramping up here, people.
Yeah, it will be surprising.
Yeah.
Okay, so they all set out to the two houses. and it's getting dark. And so they're going toward Villa Genevieve, which is Madame Renaud's house, but Poirot pauses at Villa Marguerite. And he's like, Cinderella, stay outside. And they kind of inspect the house first, which I find very odd, but they think it's normal. They kind of go around to the side of the house, and Hastings sees Marthe in the first floor window, and he sees her like tending to Jack. Then they go to the door, they knock. Madame Dubray invites them in, and Marthe is still in the same room as Jack, but they said he's sleeping. Hastings really feels afraid of Madame Dubray. He describes her as a beautiful poisonous snake. Things are still dangerous. Things still have to be unraveled. And then Poirot asks her if Stoner had been in town all day. And she's like, no. And then he continues to ask if he met with Madame Renaud. Poirot is setting up a bit of a con of his own. He is now the kind of puppet master here. And he wants to plant in Madame Dubray's mind that Madame Renaud has changed her will. Because if Marthe can get to Jack, and she's being oh so nice to him, and if Madame Renaud is out of the way, then Marthe isn't too far away from this big inheritance. So Poirot's like getting in Madame Dubray's head. He's like, so has the lawyer been to the house recently?
Yeah, he's asking Madame Dubray if she has seen Mr. Stoner, who's the secretary and lawyer for the Renaud estate, go to Villa Genevieve. Have you noticed him like showing up there? It's pretty clear that Jack is out of the will. And what does that mean if you want that money?
Madame Renaud has to die.
Yep.
And Poirot is really setting this up. So they leave Villa Marguerite. Hastings looks back and he sees the shadow of Marthe bending over Jack, still caring for him.
Yes, the silhouette.
The silhouette, yeah. And then they all arrive at the house, and Poirot's like, this is the last time. He's like, let's hide in some shrubs.
Mm-hmm. Magical shrubs. Gotta.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
He's like, let's do that. And they're kind of looking at Madame Renaud's bedroom, and they're watching her open window. And Hastings is like, Poirot, what are we doing? And he's like, we're going to watch. We're just going to watch. He's like, I don't think anything will happen yet. But then, of course, suddenly there is a cry for help, and a light flashes in the second floor, and they see the shadows of two people struggling. And this is where Poirot freaks out. Do you want to say why he's so freaked out?
Poirot has put this plan in place where Madame Renaud is going to be situated in a specific room. And then what ends up happening is that Madame Renaud says, I actually don't let this weird things have happened in this room. She tells her staff that she's going to go to another room. And no one tells Poirot this. And Madame Renaud would have been safe in the other room. Yeah. And she is vulnerable in this room, to put it very generally.
They're baiting the two Dubrays to go into the wrong room so they can be caught. Yes. And they wouldn't. He's like, Madame Renaud really isn't in danger. But because of the switch, suddenly she is in danger.
She is in danger. Poirot quickly realizes what's happening. Yeah. Which is that someone is trying to kill Madame Renaud. Yeah. And then Poirot, Hastings, and Cinderella are trying to find a way to get to the room before she's killed.
They basically kind of spot an open window on the second floor, and they realize that like that tree that we've kind of talked about before, its branch is kind of like right in front of that window. So both Hastings and Poirot are like, let's try to climb up the tree. And Cinderella is like, I've got this. I'm an acrobat. And she basically just like swings herself around and through this window.
Total badass.
Yeah. Total. Badass. Yeah. She's like, I've got this. Let me go in. I'm the only one who can do anything. Poirot and Hastings are trying to go through the front door.
Yes.
Because they're like, we can't climb trees.
Yeah, they get into the house. They go up to the room in question, but the door is locked, I believe.
Yeah. And so they're like, oh, God. And they're just hearing all this noise.
What's happening is Madame Renaud okay? Is Cinderella okay?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, this is so cool. Okay. So there's all these thuds and they're just like, what's happening? What's happening? Everything stops. And Cinderella opens the door and she lets them in. And she says, I was right on time. Hastings doesn't deserve her.
No, she is the hero of this book.
Yeah. Who knew we needed Cinderella so much? So Madame Renaud is gasping for breath. And then they look to the other person that there's like there's a body on the floor. And Poirot says, this person is the murderer of Monsieur Renaud and the would-be murderer of Madame Renaud. And it's Marthe. And she is dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so because Cinderella climbed up into the open window and ended up having to kill Martha who was in the process of trying to kill Madame Renaud.
Yeah. Okay. It happened so fast. Everything was so intense, but here we are. Yeah, it was Marthe the whole time, as we said, and she is no longer with us.
No longer.
Yeah. So then, Chad, we're here. We're here. Do you remember many weeks ago when we started recording this?
Yeah, I remember thinking it's the 100th anniversary of this book. And I feel like we started these episodes in 1923. It's amazing.
Whew, we're here. Chapter 28, The Journey's End. It is a journey's end for Hastings and Poirot and for us. We are so glad we're here. So immediately, in this part, I remember you saying you were very shocked by this part. Journey's End starts with Poirot admonishing Francoise for the room change.
It's brutal. He is like ripping on the Renaud family staff.
Yeah.
Don't be mean to the wait staff. Like, what are you, nuts?
He calls them triple idiots, which is, those are some fighting words. You don't want to be called a triple idiot by Poirot.
No, but in the same sense that it also does take us to him then turning the other cheek and absolutely complimenting Cinderella.
Oh, I love this part too. So like, what a night. The scene kind of ends. They're like, let's get the police, let's get a doctor, we have a dead person. And they go back to the hotel and Hastings is so mad because nobody has explained anything to him. He's like, I am so confused. And it's like 3 a.m. But then he wakes up and Poirot is sitting on his bed waiting for him.
Watching him sleep. Yep.
Yeah. In these books, there's a lot of uncomfortable staring, I would say. He's like, I know Hastings will want to know this, so let me tell you everything. And Hastings gets really worried about Bella, and Poirot's like, don't worry. He explains the like misidentification between Jack and Bella. They were both trying to save each other's lives, and isn't that so sweet? And then he explains that Marthe had admitted that she heard that tramp argument, right? And so it's likely that she also heard from the shrubs that Monsieur and Madame Renaud were like plotting this whole fake death thing, I guess, very loudly in their backyard. So Poirot just kind of ties up some loose ends. We'll go through the important ones. Marthe was superficial in her affection for Jack. It was all fake. It was all to inherit the money. We're released of Marthe. None of it was real. We can just be on Team Bella. And so then Poirot kind of admits that he needed to force Marthe's hand by staging that whole will argument. And then Hastings is like, well, how did she get to the house? How was she ahead of us? And that's when we go back to that silhouette in the window of a woman over Jack. And it was really Madame Dubray because she was in on it too. They're both scheming to get the Renaud money. So, and then we learned that Marthe was going to, her plan was to poison Madame Renaud, but to make it look like she had killed herself. So she was going to use an injection needle. And then Poirot again says Cinderella was the true hero of the entire day. And Hastings is like, well, what tipped you off about Marthe? And Poirot's like, the anxious eyes. He's like, I always thought of her as anxious and I needed to find out why. So I guess that's the psychology of it. Yeah, so this chapter is definitely like every little tiny loose thread. She's like, here you go. Poirot's just sitting on the bed fixing everything. And we learn that Jack is okay. He's at Villa Marguerite. Madame Dubray has disappeared. And Poirot doubts that the police will ever find her. Poirot says that he's encouraged Madame Renaud to tell Jack everything. And we find out she actually does. All of the fake identities are revealed. The mother and son, who've always cared for each other the whole time, are kind of reunited, and everything is set into place. And they go back to London.
Yes, Hastings and Poirot go back to London for one final voyage in this book of many, many, many voyages. I guess it is a jump into the future a little bit.
Yeah.
Because we find out that through descriptions of things of the flat and whatnot, that Poirot has used the 500 francs that he won in the bet from Giraud about who the actual murder was to buy a foxhound figurine that he has named Giraud. So, yeah.
Which is what a move. But also I love that it's, Poirot's being snarky, but he's also very cute. Like he has a little animal figurine and he gave it a name.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, like if you're going to be bitter about your enemy, like that's a pretty tame way to do it. That's also charming. At some point, Jack is like, hey guys, I'm going to South America. I'm going to help with my dad's business now that he's dead. And Hastings and Poirot are like, so Jack, is Bella gonna join you? What's going on here? And Jack is like, how could I ask her to come with me after all that I've done? I've kind of betrayed her with Marthe. And both Poirot and Hastings are like, you should do it anyways. And even Poirot gives a little pep talk, which is kind of cute. He says, go to her as a boy no longer, but a man. A man bowed by the fate of the past and the fate of today, but looking forward to a new and wonderful life. Ask her to share it with you. You may not realize it, but your love for each other has been tested in the fire and found not wanting. You have both been willing to lay down your lives for each other, which is so true. You can't really have any bigger gesture of love.
I agree.
And so we get this idea now that like Hastings is definitely writing in retrospect. And he says that he tells us that he's going to join Jack in South America and work on a ranch. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I don't see Hastings as the ranching type right away. He may grow into this.
Sure.
And then he gives us this little scene between him and Dulcie. Or Cinderella.
And he writes, and what of Captain Arthur Hastings, humble chronicler of these pages?
Humble.
There is some talk of his joining the Renauds on a ranch across the seas. But for the end of this story, I prefer to go back to a morning in the garden of the Via Genevieve. And I won't read the rest of it, but what happens in that garden?
It's a conversation between him and Cinderella. And he says that he's going to call her Cinderella, which, I don't know, I feel like she gets to decide what she gets to be called. And she's like, I'm never going to turn into a princess, which I think is great.
Right.
She's like, I am always going to be who I am. Then Hastings says, it's the prince's turn to interrupt. And you know what he said? Hell, said the prince, and kissed her.
Wow.
Yeah, so Hastings gets to be the prince in the end. He gets to end the story with a kiss. And I think the reason why I am so confident that they go to South America together is because in later books, Hastings is in South America with her.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, you had mentioned that. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And the last, in my copy, the last line is, and I suited the action to the word, which to me means that they became prince and princess.
Yeah. And I think also he kisses her.
Yeah. And I think that is also like a hint that they do get married and that they have a life together, which is really great for Hastings. But also really an interesting way to end the book. It does feel like Agatha Christie was like, okay, that's enough Hastings.
Yeah, goodbye.
We're good. We're good for a little while.
He does come back. And it's so funny the way it happens because he's always back on business from South America.
That is amazing. So we're seeing that styles, if we can get into biblical talk here, which I'm huge on,
Huge.
Styles begat links, and links begets all of these other times that Hastings comes back to help out with Poirot.
Yes.
Because he's working in South America, and we will know that when he's coming back that he has been with the characters of the murder on the links.
And I think you say that so well biblically. The foundation has been set, folks. Hastings is Hastings, Poirot is Poirot, and we just get to see everything, I say delightfully unfold, but then I always say things are great and then I come back and complain about them, so who knows. But everything kind of is set and the stage is set, and we just now have the Poirot series.
Oh, this is so amazing. Caitlin, what a journey we have been on. I want to just say that I know that I'm annoying and I'm a little ripe, and I've been sleeping on the beach more often than not, but thank you so much. I could not have imagined a better person to travel to France with.
Likewise.